His sister acted like his girlfriend, and everyone said I was the problem. There are certain sentences you learn very quickly not to say out loud. Sentences that, the moment they leave your mouth, change how people look at you. Sentences that shift the air in a room, that make people lean back slightly, that cause eyes to narrow just a fraction. Sentences that turn you from a reasonable person with legitimate concerns into someone who needs to be handled, managed, possibly even dismissed entirely from the conversation. This is one of them. I broke up with my boyfriend partly because of his relationship with his sister. As soon as people hear that, they stop listening. Their face is close. Their body language changes subtly but unmistakably. They've already decided what kind of person you are, what category you fit into, what box to place you in for easy dismissal. They decide you're jealous, or insecure, or projecting something inappropriate onto something innocent. They think you're one of those girlfriends, the controlling kind, the paranoid kind, the kind who can't handle a man being close to his family. The kind who sees threats where there are none. The kind who ruins good relationships with her own baggage and issues. And for a long time, months after the breakup, maybe even a full year, I wondered if they were right. I wondered if I had failed some kind of emotional test that everyone else seemed to pass effortlessly. If I didn't understand family closeness the way other people do, the way normal, well-adjusted people do. If I was too sensitive, too rigid, too easily threatened by things that shouldn't threaten me. If maybe I was the problem all along, the common denominator in my own unhappiness. If maybe I was broken in some fundamental way that made healthy family dynamics look unhealthy to me, that distorted my perception so badly I couldn't see what was really there. Because that's what I was told, over and over again, by him, with increasing frustration in his voice each time, by his family, with expressions that ranged from confusion to pity to barely concealed contempt, by mutual friends who heard the story secondhand and filled in the blanks with their own assumptions about what must have really happened, by people who knew his family and loved them and thought they were wonderful, so clearly the problem must be me, by people who thought I must be exaggerating, must be misremembering, must be letting my own baggage distort what was actually a normal, loving family dynamic. But the truth is, I didn't leave because I was jealous. I left because I slowly realized there was no space for me. Not really, not in any way that mattered, not in any way that would allow me to exist as myself, with my own needs and boundaries and identity separate from what they wanted me to be. And the most unsettling part wasn't what they did. It was how normal everyone insisted it was. How any discomfort I expressed was immediately reframed as my issue, my insecurity, my inability to understand what real family loyalty looked like. How I was made to feel like the problem for noticing patterns that everyone else either couldn't see or chose to ignore because acknowledging them would require uncomfortable conversations and difficult changes. I'm 27 years old. My ex was 29 when we met, 31 when we broke up. We were together for almost 2 years, long enough to start talking seriously about the future, about marriage, about what our life might look like together, about whether we wanted children and where we might want to live and what kind of home we'd build together. He lived with his mom and his younger sister, who was 25 at the time we started dating. And I want to say this clearly, right at the beginning, before anyone jumps to conclusions or makes assumptions about what kind of person I am. I did not see that as a red flag. I promise you, I didn't walk into this relationship with my guard up, looking for problems, waiting for signs that he wasn't independent enough or mature enough or ready for a real adult relationship. I didn't judge him for living at home. I didn't think it meant he was immature or stunted or unable to take care of himself. I didn't think it meant he lacked independence or ambition or the ability to be a functioning adult who could manage his own life. Different families do things differently. I understood that. Different cultures have different expectations about when children should leave home, or if they should leave at all. In some cultures, multiple generations living together is the norm, not the exception. Different financial situations require different arrangements. Maybe someone is saving money for a house, or helping support family members who can't work, or dealing with circumstances that make living at home the most practical option. Different obligations mean different choices. Different values create different family structures. I knew all of this. I wasn't naive about it. I understood that. I respected it. I never once made him feel bad about it or suggested that it was something he should change. I never compared him to other guys who lived alone or made comments about when he was going to move out or acted like his living situation was somehow beneath me. At first, I actually admired how close they were. He called his mom often, not just when he needed something, not just when he wanted her to do his laundry or cook him a meal, but to check in, to see how her day was going, to share little updates about his own life. He helped his sister with things, rides to appointments when her car was in the shop, advice about work situations when she was dealing with a difficult colleague, emotional support when she was going through something difficult with friends or dating. He showed up for them consistently, reliably, without complaint. He didn't treat family obligations like burdens. He seemed to genuinely enjoy spending time with them. I thought that meant he was caring. I thought it meant he understood the value of family, that he knew how to maintain important relationships, that he wouldn't be the kind of partner who disappears into a relationship and forgets about everyone else in his life. I thought it meant he would show up for me too, with that same loyalty and devotion and consistency. I thought it meant he knew how to love people, how to be there for people, how to prioritize the people who mattered to him. I thought a lot of things that turned out to be wrong. In the beginning, nothing felt overtly wrong. There was no single moment where I thought, okay, this is unacceptable. This crosses a line. This is something I can't live with. There was no dramatic incident, no obvious boundary violation, no clear red flag waving in my face that I ignored because I was too in love to see it. It was subtler than that. Much subtler. It was a feeling that lived in my body rather than my mind. A tension I couldn't explain or articulate or even fully identify at first. A sense that something was slightly off, even when I couldn't point to concrete evidence. Even when I couldn't name what exactly was bothering me. It was like a low-frequency hum that you can feel more than hear. Present but not obvious. There but easy to dismiss. Something you can convince yourself you're imagining if you try hard enough. The first time I really noticed it, the first time the feeling crystallized into something I could almost name, almost point to, we were all sitting together casually at his house. It was just a regular evening, nothing special or significant. We'd had dinner together, nothing fancy, just pasta and salad that his mom had made. No drama, no conflict, no tension that I was aware of. Just sitting around talking after dinner, the way you do when you're comfortable with people and there's nowhere else you need to be. His sister pulled out her phone and showed me a picture of a guy she was talking to. Some guy from a dating app, I think, or maybe someone she'd met at a party or through friends. She was asking what I thought, showing me his profile, reading me some of their messages. The way women sometimes do when they're trying to gauge if someone is worth pursuing, if the vibe is right, if there are any red flags they're missing, if they should keep investing energy or cut their losses and move on. I looked at the picture. He was conventionally attractive, tall, good bone structure, nice smile, well dressed in the photo she showed me. I smiled politely and said, "Oh, he's cute." That was it. That was the entire comment. 3 words. I didn't elaborate. I didn't go into detail about what specifically made him attractive. I didn't flirt with the idea of him. I didn't compare him to anyone else. I didn't say anything that should have been remotely controversial or offensive or inappropriate. It was the kind of bland, supportive comment you make when someone shows you a picture of someone they're interested in. But immediately, and I mean immediately, like within a single second, her energy changed. The warmth that had been there a moment before evaporated. Her face tightened just enough that I noticed. The smile disappeared. Her body language shifted from open to closed, arms crossing, shoulders pulling back, jaw setting. The air in the room changed in a way I couldn't quite define but could definitely feel. She said something like, "You should respect my brother." The words hung in the air. I remember laughing, not because it was funny, but because I was confused. Genuinely, completely confused. I didn't understand what she meant. I didn't understand the connection between what I'd said and her response. I wasn't talking about him. I wasn't comparing anyone to him. I wasn't disrespecting him in any way that I could identify. I was commenting on a completely different person, someone who had nothing to do with my boyfriend at all. But the laugh didn't land. She didn't smile back. She didn't soften. She didn't say just kidding or give any indication that this was a joke I wasn't getting. There was no warmth behind it, no indication that she was joking or teasing or that I had simply misunderstood the tone. Her face stayed hard. Her eyes stayed cold. It felt like a warning. Like I had crossed some invisible line I didn't know existed. Like I had violated some rule I hadn't been told about. Like I was being put on notice that I was being watched, that my words were being monitored, that I needed to be more careful about what came out of my mouth. I went home that night and replayed it in my head over and over, the way you do when a social interaction goes wrong and you can't figure out why, when you keep examining it from every angle trying to understand what you did wrong. Maybe I misunderstood her tone. Maybe she was joking and I just didn't catch it because I don't know her well enough yet, because I'm not fluent in their family's communication style. Maybe I was projecting my own anxieties onto an innocent comment. Maybe I was being too sensitive, reading into things that weren't there, creating problems that didn't exist. So I let it go. At least, I tried to. I pushed it down. I told myself I was overreacting. But the feeling stayed. That small, uncomfortable feeling that something wasn't quite right. That I had been warned about something. That I was being watched and evaluated in ways I didn't fully understand. Not long after that, maybe a couple of weeks, maybe a month, we were all talking again. Just general conversation, the kind of meandering discussion that happens when people are comfortable with each other and there's no particular agenda or topic. We were at his house again. It seemed like we were always at his house. I was starting to notice that. How rarely he came to my apartment. How most of our time together happened in his family's space, on their terms, with them present or nearby. She started talking about sex. Very openly, not in a vague, euphemistic way. Not with the kind of discretion you might expect in mixed company, especially with family present. Graphic details, explicit jokes, stories about her experiences, about things she liked or didn't like, about encounters she'd had with different partners. Things I wouldn't say in front of my brother. Things I wouldn't say in front of my mother. Things I wouldn't say in front of most of my friends, honestly. I didn't initiate the conversation. I never do. I'm fairly private about that kind of thing, especially around people I don't know extremely well. It's not that I'm a prude or that I think sex is shameful or that I can't talk about it at all. I just don't feel comfortable discussing intimate details of my sex life with people I'm not extremely close to. And I definitely don't feel comfortable discussing it in front of family members. But she was comfortable with it, and at first I thought, okay, maybe this is just how she is. Some people are more open. Some families talk about these things more freely. It's not my style, but it doesn't mean it's wrong. Different people have different comfort levels with these topics. Different families have different boundaries about what's appropriate to discuss. I was trying to be understanding, trying not to judge, trying to accept that their family dynamic was just different from mine. At one point, in response to something she said, some joke she made about guys and their lack of skill in bed, I casually remarked that yeah, some guys don't really know what they're doing in bed. That sexual competence isn't universal, that plenty of men have no idea how to actually please a partner, that it's frustrating when you're with someone who thinks enthusiasm is the same thing as skill. It was a throwaway comment. The kind of thing women say to each other all the time when they're talking about dating and relationships. General, not specific, not directed at anyone in particular. Not about my boyfriend, not about any specific person at all, really, just a general observation about men as a category, the kind of commiserating complaint that women share when they're bonding over shared frustrations. Suddenly she snapped, "Are you talking about my brother?" Her voice wasn't playful, it wasn't teasing, it wasn't the kind of defensive that comes with a smile, that signals you're joking but also maybe a little serious, that invites you to laugh it off together. It was sharp, actually aggressive, the kind of tone that stops a conversation dead, the kind of tone that makes everyone else in the room go quiet and look away uncomfortably. And I felt this immediate jolt of discomfort in my body, like an alarm going off, like my nervous system recognized danger before my brain could process what was happening. My heart rate picked up, my face got hot, my stomach dropped, because once again, I hadn't been talking about him. The comment wasn't about him at all. It was a general observation about men in general, in response to her general observation about the same thing. There was no reason to think I was talking about him specifically. No logical connection between what I'd said and him, but she had inserted him into the comment anyway. She had assumed I was talking about him, or decided to position my comment as being about him. And more than that, she had leapt to protect him from me. From his girlfriend, from the person who was supposed to be his partner, the person who loved him, the person who was building a life with him. That was the first time I clearly thought, why does she feel like she needs to defend him from me? Why does it feel like I'm already being positioned as a threat to him rather than a partner? Why is she treating me like an enemy instead of like someone who loves her brother? I didn't confront her, I didn't say anything dramatic or make a scene, I didn't demand an explanation or tell her she was out of line. I didn't point out that I hadn't been talking about him at all, that she was putting words in my mouth, that she was creating a problem where none existed. I just laughed it off awkwardly and changed the subject as quickly as I could. I made some joke about how all men could benefit from a little more education in that department, tried to lighten the mood, tried to move past the tension she'd created. Instead, I did what a lot of women do in uncomfortable situations. I tried to be chill. I tried to be cool. I tried not to rock the boat or cause problems or be that girlfriend who can't handle his family, who's always causing drama, who's always making things difficult. I told myself she was just protective, that siblings joke differently than other people do, that their family dynamic was just different from mine, and different doesn't mean wrong. That I needed to loosen up and not take things so seriously. That I was being oversensitive, reading too much into things, creating problems where none existed. I adjusted, I modulated, I began the slow process of making myself smaller. I spoke less around her. I filtered myself more carefully, running everything through a mental screening process before I said it, trying to anticipate how it might be interpreted or twisted. I watched my tone, my word choices, my facial expressions, the volume of my voice. I became hyper-aware of how everything I said might be interpreted, how it might be twisted, how it might be used against me later. And the more I adjusted, the more I tried to fit myself into what seemed acceptable, the more I tried to be the version of myself that wouldn't cause problems, the more invisible I started to feel. Like I was disappearing a little bit at a time. Like I was erasing myself to make room for their comfort. Like the real me was becoming less and less welcome, and I had to present this carefully curated version instead. After that, the questions started. And they always happened in front of him. Never in private, never woman to woman, the way you might expect if someone was genuinely trying to get to know their brother's girlfriend, trying to build a relationship with her, trying to make her feel welcome in the family. Always with him present, like he needed to hear my answers, like she was gathering information on his behalf, like this was some kind of formal evaluation that required his input or approval. How many boyfriends have you had? Why did your last relationship end? What happened there? Who broke up with whom? Whose fault was it? What do you usually look for in a guy? What are your deal breakers? What's the longest relationship you've been in? Why haven't you been married yet? Do you want to get married? When do you want to get married? How soon is too soon? They were framed as curiosity, as getting to know me, as normal questions that someone might ask when they're trying to understand their brother's girlfriend, when they want to make sure he's with someone good, when they care about his happiness and want to know who's in his life. But the tone wasn't curious. It wasn't warm or friendly or genuinely interested in who I was as a person, what made me tick, what I cared about, what my dreams were, what my values were. It felt evaluative, clinical, almost, like I was being assessed, like I was in an interview I hadn't applied for. Like she was gathering information to decide whether I was acceptable, whether I met some standard I hadn't been told about, whether I was good enough for her brother. I answered honestly at first. I smiled. I explained my past relationships in general terms, how long they lasted, why they ended, what I learned from them. I tried to be open without being too revealing. I tried to strike the right balance between honest and appropriate, between forthcoming and oversharing. I tried to reassure her that I was a good person, that I cared about her brother, that I wasn't going to hurt him, that my intentions were genuine. But no matter what I said, it never felt like enough. The questions kept coming, new ones, follow-up ones, ones that probed deeper into areas I'd already covered. But why did that relationship really end? What was your part in that? What would your ex say about you? And I always walked away with the sense that I'd failed some invisible test, that my answers hadn't been quite right, that I was still being evaluated and found lacking in some way I couldn't identify. At some point, and I don't even remember how it came up, maybe someone mentioned it in passing at a family gathering, maybe she brought it up herself, I learned something that made my stomach drop. She had gone to a witch. Not metaphorically, not jokingly, not as some fun activity with friends, like getting your palm read at a carnival. An actual witch, someone who did readings and rituals and claimed to have spiritual insight into people's true natures. To see if a girl had good intentions toward her brother. Of him. I laughed when I heard it. Because it sounded absurd, like something out of a movie. Like something so over the top that it couldn't possibly be real, that it had to be an exaggeration or a joke or something lost in translation. But it wasn't. It was real. She had actually done this. Multiple times, apparently. For multiple girlfriends over the years. And underneath the humor was something else. Something darker. Something that made me deeply uncomfortable in a way I couldn't quite articulate. Why did she feel the need to vet his partners like that? Why did she see herself as the gatekeeper to his romantic life? Why was it her job to determine who was worthy of him, who had good intentions, who was safe for him to be with? Why couldn't she trust his judgment? Why couldn't she let him make his own choices about who to date, who to love, who to build a life with? Then I started hearing about his past relationships. Stories came out gradually, pieces of information dropped casually into conversations over weeks and months. Sometimes from him, sometimes from other family members, sometimes from her directly. She had fought with his exes. Multiple exes, not just one problematic girlfriend, but a pattern across multiple relationships. She had argued with them, confronted them about things they'd said or done, inserted herself into conflicts that had nothing to do with her, that should have been between him and his partner, that weren't her business. She had opinions about every girl he'd ever dated. Strong opinions, detailed critiques. She remembered specific things they'd said or done years ago. She kept track of their flaws, their mistakes, their failings. She wasn't shy about sharing them, about making sure everyone knew what she thought, about positioning herself as the expert on what her brother needed, what was good for him, what kind of woman was acceptable. And no one stopped her. No one said, "This isn't your place. This isn't your relationship. You need to step back and let him handle his own romantic life." Instead, it was framed as loyalty, as love, as what good siblings do, as evidence that she cared about him and wanted to protect him. She just cares about him so much. She's protective. It's sweet, really. They're close. That's how their family is. You'll get used to it. She's been hurt before. She just doesn't want to see him get hurt. But it didn't feel like care. It felt territorial. It felt like ownership. Like she had claimed him first, and anyone else would always be secondary. Like he belonged to her in some fundamental way, and romantic partners were intruders who needed to be vetted, tested, evaluated, and possibly rejected if they didn't meet her standards. This is where it started to wear me down in a serious way. Where the pattern became so obvious that I couldn't pretend it wasn't happening anymore, couldn't convince myself I was imagining things, couldn't rationalize it away as me being oversensitive. If my boyfriend and I were together, if we were spending time alone, having a conversation, watching a movie, cooking dinner together, just being together in the way couples are, she needed him. Not occasionally, not once in a while when something important came up. Constantly, persistently, almost compulsively. If he came to my place, my apartment, my space, the place where we should have been able to be alone together without interruption, she'd call. Not because something was wrong. Not because there was an emergency or urgent situation. Not because she needed help with something time-sensitive or important. Just to talk. Just to show him where she was. Just to tell him who she was with. Just to update him on whatever drama was unfolding in her life or her friend group. Just to maintain contact, to keep herself present in his awareness, to make sure he was thinking about her, to remind him that she existed and needed his attention. Sometimes she FaceTimed him into hangouts with her friends. She'd call and say hi to everyone. And suddenly he was on screen, waving at people I didn't know, people he didn't really know either, participating in their conversations and inside jokes while I sat there next to him. Watching, waiting, feeling invisible, feeling like I didn't matter. Feeling like our time together wasn't sacred or protected or important enough to defend. I'd be sitting right there next to him. Right there, close enough to touch, and I'd watch him laugh at their jokes. Watch him engage with them, ask questions about their lives, tell stories about his own life. Watch him give them his attention, his energy, his presence. While I sat there waiting for the call to end so we could go back to what we were doing. So I could have him back. So I could matter again. So I could feel like I was his priority instead of an afterthought. If I asked him to come into another room with me, to help with something in the kitchen, to talk privately about something that was bothering me, to just be alone for a moment without his phone between us, it was almost guaranteed that within minutes, his phone would ring. And he'd look at the screen. And without fail, he'd say, "It's my sister. She just needs me for a second." And he'd go. He'd answer. He'd engage. He'd give her whatever she wanted, his attention, his time, his energy, his presence. He'd walk away from me mid-conversation, mid-activity, mid-moment. He'd prioritize her needs over mine without a second thought. Again, and again, and again. It became almost predictable. I could almost set my watch by it. I started noticing how rarely he said, "I'll call you back." How rarely he let a call go to voicemail with the intention of calling her later when we weren't together. How rarely he said, "I'm with my girlfriend right now. Can this wait?" How quickly he responded to her, how immediately he made himself available, no matter what we were doing, no matter what we were in the middle of, no matter how intimate or important our moment had been. How easily our time together was interrupted. How often our plans were adjusted or changed because she needed something. How frequently I found myself waiting, watching, wondering when I would matter more than the next phone call. When our relationship would be important enough to protect from constant intrusion. At some point, I realized something unsettling. I was timing it, not consciously, not deliberately, but my body was keeping score without my permission. How long did we get before she called? 5 minutes? 10? 20 if we were lucky? How many minutes did we have of uninterrupted time? How much of his attention was actually mine? What percentage of our time together was actually ours versus time that could be interrupted at any moment? That was always contingent on her not needing him. And that's when I knew something wasn't right. Because when you start measuring the time you get with your partner, when you start calculating whether you matter more than his sister, when you start keeping mental tallies of how often you're prioritized versus how often you're not, something fundamental is broken. That's not what healthy relationships look like. That's not what it feels like to be chosen. That's not what partnership means. Then came the comparisons. The subtle and not so subtle ways I was measured against her and found wanting. The ways I was expected to change, to adapt, to become more like what they wanted me to be. I'm thin. She isn't. I'm not saying that to be cruel or judgmental or to shame anyone's body. I'm saying it because it became relevant in ways I never expected. Because it became something she talked about constantly. Because my body became a point of reference, a reminder of what she used to look like, a symbol of something she'd lost, something she mourned. She'd mention how she used to be thin like me, how her body had changed over the years, how hard it was to see pictures of herself from when she was younger and barely recognize the person she saw. How frustrated she was with her weight now, how much she struggled with it, how unfair it felt that some people could stay thin without effort while she had to work so hard for every pound. And I'd listen sympathetically. I'd make the appropriate supportive comments. I'd try to be kind without being patronizing, understanding without making it about me. I'd tell her she looked great, that bodies change and that's normal, that she shouldn't be so hard on herself, that health matters more than size. I'd try to be the supportive friend, the understanding almost sister-in-law. But then she'd pivot, suddenly and without warning. You know what would look amazing on you? These fake lashes. They'd make your eyes look so much bigger. You'd look so good with them. I could show you how to put them on. This style would look really good on you. You should try it sometime. I think it would really suit your face shape. You'd look so much prettier if you wore your hair like this. Have you ever thought about styling it differently? Maybe some layers? Some highlights? Have you ever thought about dressing more like this? I think you'd look amazing in this kind of outfit. You should try stepping out of your comfort zone. I don't wear fake lashes. I never have. They're not my style. I prefer a more natural look, minimal makeup, understated rather than dramatic. I like looking like myself, not like I'm wearing a mask. We have completely different styles. Different personalities, different energy, different tastes in everything from clothes to music to how we present ourselves to the world. And that should have been okay. That should have been accepted. Celebrated, even. But slowly, persistently, she started trying to reshape me. To make me more like her. Or more like what she thought I should be. To turn me into some version of myself that would fit better into their family, that would be more acceptable, that would reflect their values and aesthetics. And slowly, disturbingly, my boyfriend started echoing her. Like she was training him, and he was an obedient student. He'd see her wearing something, a dress, a particular style of jewelry, a certain makeup look, and he'd turn to me and ask, would you wear that? Not do you like that? Not what do you think of that style? Not I'm curious about your taste in fashion. But would you wear that? With an expectation in his voice. With a hope that maybe I'd say yes, that maybe I'd be willing to change, to adapt, to become more like what he and his family wanted. He asked if I wore dresses more often, because his mom liked them. Because his mom thought women should dress more femininely, more traditionally, more in line with her generation's expectations of what women should look like. He wanted me to be more extroverted, more loud, more the kind of person who commanded attention in a room, who was the life of the party, who never met a stranger. He wanted me to be someone I fundamentally wasn't. He wanted me to be more physically affectionate in front of his family. More demonstrative, more willing to perform our relationship for them, to prove through constant physical contact that we were together, that things were good between us, that I wasn't cold or distant or withholding. More like them, more like their family, more like what they understood and were comfortable with. Less like me, less like the person I actually was, the person he'd supposedly fallen in love with. I didn't change overnight, but I started shrinking. I talked less when we were around his family. I second-guessed everything before I said it, running it through a mental filter, trying to anticipate how it would be received. I questioned myself more. Was I being too quiet? Too reserved? Too different from what they wanted? Was I failing some test I didn't know I was taking? Was I not trying hard enough to fit in? I tried harder to be the version of myself that might finally be acceptable. The version that wouldn't cause problems or raise concerns or be criticized later in private conversations I wasn't part of. I wondered if who I was, fundamentally, essentially, at my core, was enough. If the person I actually am, the person I've always been, could ever be what they wanted. If I would ever be able to stop trying so hard and just exist. Just be myself without it being a problem, without it being something that needed to be fixed or improved or changed. And that question followed me everywhere. Into every interaction, every family gathering, every conversation, every moment we spent together. It lived in my chest like a stone, heavy and cold and constant. By this point, nothing had happened that I could point to and say, this is the reason. This is the specific thing that's unacceptable. This is why I can't do this anymore. But my body knew. My body was screaming at me that something was wrong. That something was crowded. That there wasn't enough space for me to exist as myself. That I was being squeezed into a shape that didn't fit me, that would never fit me, no matter how much I tried to contort myself. And the scariest part was this. Every time I tried to name it, every time I tried to explain what I was feeling, every time I tried to articulate the discomfort that lived in my body and grew a little bigger every day, I was told it wasn't real. That I was imagining things. That I was too sensitive. That I was making problems where none existed. That I was letting my own insecurity create issues in what was actually a healthy, loving family dynamic. Then came the breaking point. By the time I reached it, I was already tired in a way that sleep couldn't fix. In a way that a vacation or a break or some time apart couldn't address. In a way that rest wouldn't cure. Not tired like I needed a nap or a weekend away or a good night's sleep. Tired like something inside me was constantly bracing for impact. Like I was always half tensed, always half waiting for the next uncomfortable moment, the next boundary crossed, the next time I'd have to swallow my feelings and pretend everything was fine when it wasn't. Every visit to his house felt like walking into a minefield. I never knew what might set things off, what innocent comment might be twisted into evidence of my inadequacy. Every family interaction required so much energy, so much careful navigation, so much monitoring of myself and my reactions. I had to think about everything, what I said, how I said it, what my face was doing, whether I was smiling enough, whether I was being warm enough, whether I was meeting whatever invisible standard existed. Every time we spent time together with his family, there was this low-level tension humming in the background. This sense that I needed to be on guard, that I couldn't fully relax, that something might happen at any moment that would require me to defend myself or my place in his life or my right to have boundaries. And I couldn't explain it without sounding dramatic. Without sounding jealous or insecure or like I was making mountains out of molehills. Without sounding like the problem was me, not them. I just carried it. I internalized it. I made it my problem to manage. What finally made it impossible to ignore was how sexual everything was. Not between me and my boyfriend. Between him and his sister. She talked about sex constantly when we were all together. Not in a vague way. Not in a joking, lighthearted way that some siblings might. Not in a haha, isn't sex funny kind of way. Explicit, detailed, graphic. The kind of things I wouldn't even discuss with my closest friends in mixed company. Around him, with him, like it was the most natural thing in the world. She made comments about his body. About his physical appearance, about his attractiveness, things that made me deeply uncomfortable but that everyone else seemed to think were normal. She slapped his butt, openly, casually, like it was nothing. Like it was just a joke. Like physical familiarity between adult siblings of opposite genders was something everyone did. She'd say things like, if he wasn't my brother, I'd date him. He's exactly my type. And everyone laughed. Everyone. His mom, other family members, him. I didn't laugh. I couldn't. I froze every time. Because I don't talk about sex with my brother. I don't joke about his body. I don't comment on his attractiveness. I don't touch him in ways that could be interpreted as sexual, even as a joke. Those aren't things I've ever considered doing. Those aren't things that would ever occur to me as appropriate or funny or normal. So I stayed quiet, and that silence, that inability to join in, to laugh along, to participate in what everyone else seemed to think was completely fine, made me feel even more isolated. Like I was the outsider. The uptight one. The one who didn't understand their family dynamic. I remember sitting there, watching this happen, and thinking, am I the weird one? Is this normal and I just don't know it? Is my family just more reserved? Are there different standards in different families and I'm judging them by mine? Or are there lines here that no one else sees? Boundaries that everyone else is pretending don't exist? When I finally brought it up to my boyfriend, carefully, gently, trying so hard not to sound accusatory, it went exactly how you'd expect. She didn't mean it like that. That's just how she jokes. You're overthinking this. You're making it weird by pointing it out. That's just how our family is. We're comfortable with each other. Every response shut the door. Not just on the conversation. On me. On my feelings. On my perception of what was happening. I didn't use the word gaslighting at the time. But that's what it was. Because my feelings weren't just dismissed, they were reframed as a flaw in me. As evidence that something was wrong with me, not with the situation. Too sensitive, too judgmental, too uncomfortable with closeness, too uptight, too insecure. And when someone you love keeps telling you that, when someone you trust keeps insisting that your feelings are wrong, you start to wonder if they're right. You start to doubt your own perception, your own judgment, your own sense of what's normal and what isn't. It wasn't just his sister. His mom was deeply intertwined too. The whole family operated as this closed unit, and I was realizing more and more that there wasn't room for anyone new. His mom was always involved, always aware, always commenting, always inserting herself. She called me to gossip about other people in the family, to complain about other partners, to share her opinions about who was doing what wrong. She talked badly about his older brother's wife, the same woman I would later see crying at a family reunion because of how she was treated. The same woman who had been married into this family for years and was still considered an outsider, still criticized, still not quite good enough. I didn't engage in the gossip. I listened politely. I made non-committal sounds. I changed the subject when I could. But I noticed something. This wasn't about me specifically. This was about outsiders in general. Every partner that came into this family became a problem eventually. Every girlfriend had to prove herself, over and over, and the bar kept moving. Every wife was criticized behind her back. Every woman who wasn't part of the original family unit was scrutinized, judged, and found lacking in some way. And suddenly, my discomfort made sense. This wasn't personal. This was systemic. The moment that really shook me, the moment I saw my future clearly, happened at a family gathering. His older brother's wife was there. She's a kind woman, quiet. She tries so hard to fit in, to be liked, to do everything right. And I watched his mom and sister pick at her all evening. Small comments that seemed harmless on the surface but added up. Undermining jokes, passive-aggressive remarks about her cooking, her parenting choices, her clothes, her hair. I watched her smile get tighter. I watched her laugh become more forced. I watched her eyes fill with tears that she tried to blink away. I watched her excuse herself to the bathroom, and when she came back, her eyes were red. Later, someone mentioned casually that she'd been crying. That this happened at most family gatherings. That she'd learned to just accept it because there was nothing she could do. And something in me went cold. Because I realized, this is what my future looks like. This is what happens to women who marry into this family. This is what I'm signing up for if I stay. Years of this. Decades of this. A lifetime of being criticized, of never being quite good enough, of being tolerated but never truly accepted. After that realization, the pressure increased. Or maybe I was just finally seeing it clearly. They don't really know you yet. You need to spend more time with them. You should try harder to connect with my sister. My family's opinion matters to me. I need them to like you. I was already trying. I showed up to every family event. I was respectful. I bought thoughtful birthday gifts. Christmas gifts. I remembered details about people's lives and asked follow-up questions. I made conversation. I smiled. I laughed at jokes. I helped clean up. I did everything I could think of to be a good partner and a good potential family member. But it was never enough. Because the goalposts kept moving. Every time I thought I'd finally done enough, there was something else. Some other way I wasn't quite right. Some other adjustment I needed to make. I started to feel like I wasn't being loved for who I was. I was being evaluated for how well I could blend into their existing dynamic. How well I could mirror them. How little disruption I caused. How willing I was to change myself to fit their expectations. I wasn't supposed to have boundaries. I was supposed to adapt. I was supposed to be flexible enough to become whatever they needed me to be. At some point, I stopped speaking up about my discomfort. Not because I was okay with what was happening, but because I was exhausted. Every attempt to explain myself ended the same way. With me being told I was wrong, I was too sensitive, I was making problems, I needed to examine my own insecurities. So I withdrew. I stopped sharing my discomfort with him. I stopped asking for reassurance. I stopped trying to explain what I was feeling. I just started carrying it alone. Holding it all inside. Pretending everything was fine while something inside me slowly died. Eventually, I couldn't hold it anymore. The weight of pretending became too much. We were alone one evening. It was calm. There was no fight happening. No immediate conflict. Just a quiet moment when I finally had the courage to speak. I told him I was struggling with his family dynamic. That I felt crowded. That I felt like there were no boundaries between us as a couple and them as a family. That sometimes it felt like I didn't have space in his life. Not real space, not the kind that's protected and prioritized. His response was immediate and defensive. He told me I was misinterpreting everything. That their closeness was normal. That lots of families are close like this. That I was making something out of nothing. That I needed to examine why I felt threatened by his relationship with his family. That's when something shifted in me. Not anger, not hurt, clarity, because I realized something devastating. He wasn't going to choose me. Not over them, not even with them. I would always be competing for space, for priority, for the right to matter as much as they did. And I would always lose. I said something that had been forming in my chest for months, something I'd been too afraid to say out loud because once I said it, I knew what it would mean. I don't think I want to marry into this family. He stared at me, like I had insulted him, like I had accused him of something unforgivable, like I had attacked everything he valued. He said he didn't believe me. That I was wrong, that I was exaggerating, that I was letting my insecurity ruin something good. There was nothing left to say. Because if someone can't even consider your reality, if they can't even acknowledge that your experience might be valid, there's no foundation to build a future on. I didn't feel angry at that moment. I felt empty, hollow, like something had been carved out of me. I didn't leave because of one comment, or one joke, or one boundary crossed, or one moment that was unforgivable. I left because I felt like I was slowly being erased. Like the person I actually was, the person I'd always been, was incompatible with the person they needed me to be. I left because love shouldn't feel like competition. Because intimacy shouldn't be communal. Because boundaries shouldn't be negotiable based on someone else's comfort. After we broke up, the guilt came. The second guessing. The endless loop of what if I was wrong? What if I had just tried harder? What if I had been more patient? What if I had given it more time? What if I had been less sensitive, more adaptable, more willing to change? But then I remembered how my body felt in those final months. Tense, small, invisible, like I was disappearing. And I knew I'd made the right choice. Some families call it closeness. Some call it loyalty, some call it love, but when closeness requires silence, and loyalty requires erasure, and love demands you become someone else, that's not actually love. That's something else entirely. In the aftermath, the strangest part wasn't the breakup itself. It was the silence afterward. No more tension sitting in my chest like a stone. No more bracing before family gatherings. No more rehearsing how to act, what to say, how not to offend anyone. No more walking on eggshells. Just quiet, just space, just the absence of that constant low-level anxiety. And in that quiet, something uncomfortable crept in. Doubt. I started asking myself questions that had no clear answers. What if I misread everything? What if this really was just a close family and I couldn't handle it? What if I let my own discomfort ruin something good? What if I'm the kind of person who can't handle a man being close to his family? Because no one wants to be that person. No one wants to be the villain in their own story. No one wants to be the jealous girlfriend who broke up over a feeling. Especially when everyone else insists that feeling is wrong. When everyone tells you you're overreacting. When you have no smoking gun, no concrete proof, just this persistent sense that something wasn't right. The reason this haunted me for so long wasn't because anything blatantly horrible happened. It was because everything lived in the gray. No single moment was outrageous enough to point to. No clear villain. No obvious abuse. Just patterns. Subtle ones. The kind that only reveal themselves after you step back and see the whole picture. The kind that people can easily dismiss as you being too sensitive. As you not understanding family closeness. As you being the problem. It took me time, months of distance, therapy, conversations with people who could see the situation more clearly than I could, to understand this. Closeness allows individuality. Enmeshment erases it. In healthy families, people have emotional privacy. They have separate relationships. They have boundaries that are respected even when they're inconvenient. Romantic partners aren't evaluated as threats to family bonds. They're welcomed as expansions of the family. They're allowed to exist as themselves, not as modified versions that fit a particular mold. Boundaries exist even when love does. In fact, boundaries exist because love does. Because real love respects individuality. Real love creates space for people to be themselves. In this family, everything was shared. Nothing was private. And anyone new had to assimilate completely or be forever positioned as an outsider. I wasn't competing for love. I was competing for space. For uninterrupted time. For emotional priority. For the right to be his partner, not an accessory to their family dynamic, not an addition that had to prove her worth endlessly, but an actual equal partner. And when those things aren't protected, when those things aren't even acknowledged as legitimate needs, love doesn't feel safe. It feels conditional. It feels like you're always one mistake away from being criticized, one boundary away from being labeled difficult. One night, weeks after the breakup, I remembered something small but significant. Every time I expressed discomfort with something, I was told I needed to change. Not them, me. Be more extroverted, be more affectionate, be more like his sister. Be less sensitive, be more understanding, be more flexible. The message was always the same: you're the problem. You need to adjust. You need to become different from who you are. And I realized, that wasn't love. That was conformity. Love should feel like relief. Like being chosen without competition. Like knowing someone has your back, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it means disappointing their family, even when it requires setting boundaries they don't like. Love doesn't require you to shrink yourself to fit into someone else's family system. Love doesn't ask you to erase your own needs and boundaries to make other people comfortable. The questions I asked myself are, was I wrong for saying it was weird? For naming something that made people uncomfortable? For refusing to laugh along with jokes that felt inappropriate? For having boundaries that his family didn't share? Was I wrong for expecting privacy in our relationship? For wanting time alone with him that wasn't constantly interrupted? For wanting to be prioritized over his sister sometimes? Was I wrong for refusing to marry into a dynamic that felt invasive? For choosing to leave rather than spend my life trying to earn approval that might never come? The answer came slowly, but it came clearly. Discomfort is information. Your body notices things your mind tries to rationalize away. Your gut knows things your brain tries to explain away. And when multiple boundaries are crossed, emotionally, sexually, relationally, it's okay to step back. It's okay to say, this doesn't work for me. It's okay to leave, even when you can't point to one specific unforgivable thing. I'm telling this story because I know how isolating it is. When everyone around you insists something is normal, when your partner tells you you're overreacting, when his family tells you you're too sensitive, when mutual friends tell you you just don't understand close families, you start to feel like you're losing your grip on reality. You start to wonder if you're crazy. If you're making problems where none exist. If you're the toxic one, the difficult one, the one who ruins good things with your issues and insecurities. But you're not. You're not crazy for noticing patterns. You're not jealous for wanting boundaries. You're not cruel for choosing yourself. You're not weak for leaving something that didn't feel right, even when you couldn't fully explain why. I didn't leave because I didn't love him. I loved him very much. I left because love wasn't enough to survive that system. And it never would have been. No amount of love could have made that dynamic healthy. No amount of effort on my part could have created space where there was none. No amount of changing myself could have made me acceptable enough. Because the problem wasn't me. The problem was a family system that didn't have room for anyone new to exist as themselves. What I know now is that I deserve to be prioritized. Not exclusively, not to the point where he has no other relationships, but enough that I don't feel like I'm constantly fighting for his attention and time. I deserve privacy in my relationship. I deserve intimate conversations that aren't shared with his family. I deserve moments that are just ours, not communal property. I deserve a partner who protects our relationship. Who sets boundaries with his family when needed. Who stands up for me when I'm being treated poorly. Who acknowledges my reality even when it's uncomfortable. I deserve a family dynamic that welcomes me, not tests me. That accepts me as I am rather than constantly trying to reshape me. That sees me as an addition. Subscribe for more stories like this.